Hey, what is up, you guys?
Your parents are the problem.
Don't steal this from me.
Go ahead. Tell them the title.
Tell them about how every time...
Who edits? We all know that you can just delete me, you know?
Let's tell them about how every time I share any kind of story about anything, you steal the punchline.
Fully owning it.
Okay. All right. What is up, you guys? In case I delete all of that. This is Sammy.
I think it's a perfect lead-in.
I'm Sammy. This is Spencer.
Spencer Robbins.
And we're the owners of Alive and Free. Welcome to our channel. If you haven't yet, subscribe, like it, share it with a friend. Maybe you don't like it, then you can click the thumbs down and never recommend us to anyone ever. Maybe you think that we're like the bad Christians that are self-absorbed and we don't read the Bible because we make everything about us. Or maybe you're like, finally, there are people that are taking things a step deeper. There are people that are talking about the things that are going on in me internally that I feel all of this shame about because I don't know how to get free from it. If that's you, you're our kind of people. We love you. Okay, so this video, I titled it, Your Parents Are the Problem. Like, it's kind of like a psych, they're not the problem, but the reality is that they kind of are at the same time. So before we dive in, what I'm not saying.
You don't need to share this in the beginning. Let's get to all the good nitty gritty stuff and then you can say what you're not saying afterwards.
Okay, here's
too many disclaimers.
No, I need disclaimers first.
Okay.
Do not decide what you think about this video and write comments about it unless you have watched the entire thing.
Yes. If you're watching the first 4 minutes and you're like, I hate these people, they're heretics, and they don't honor parents and all this different stuff, it's like...
Don't be like that.
Don't do that. Watch the entire thing.
Get context.
Yes.
Like, figure it out. Hear what we're saying before you decide that you have an opinion that's right.
Because we are going to say some challenging stuff, but we are also going to be giving a lot of context and helping you understand different things, but we also have a very limited time.
Yeah.
In these short videos to be able to break down some of these principles and topics.
So my next disclaimer is there are going to be a lot of things that we will not be able to share with you. What I want for you is to recognize that we're just opening up a process for you and we're hitting on a few things that we will never be able to fully cover with you. This is why we have group coaching programs, because these are topics that we really dive into. And so just understand, like, you're not going to get all of the context and all of the information, and we won't be able to solve all of your program problems. But what we do have is programs.
Nice.
You see the dyslexia? It just is like, oh, I'm going to switch that word for you in your head. We have programs that help you walk through this. So let us just take you on a journey and see where it unfolds. And if you want more help, we can help you.
So if you're watching this and triggers come up or you start feeling anxiety, or listening to this, if you're starting to feel anxiety or if you have moments where all of a sudden your heart starts beating faster, you feel offended or something hits you in a way that you feel tons of emotion, or all of a sudden you feel shut down, or you feel big energy or anger, or something happens within you, understand that that's actually an invitation to go on a process, to invite God into it, to understand that something's happening in you in response to something that you heard or saw. And it's an invitation. It's not the problem. It's actually just revealing something in you.
And this is a really good tool to grab onto for your life in general. If we say something or do something where you're like, I hate that, and you have all of this big energy, there's actually something that's going on inside of you that's getting exposed that actually has nothing to do with us. If you take that same concept to your everyday life and relationships, if a boss talks to you a certain way, if you have a certain interaction with a friend, that is an invitation for you to figure out, why did that thing that person did or said affect me like that? I'm going to figure out where this is coming from, because really they're not the problem. So let this, if you get triggered, let it be an invitation to explore and discover and learn about yourself, what's going on in you and why.
So let's talk about the content of the video. So we're actually creating this video because we want to help you identify different reasons why you identify yourself in a different way, why you may push love away, why you may feel extremely needy in different areas in your heart.
Why you may sabotage relationships. Why you get triggered if your friend or guy is on the phone.
Why you attract certain men in relationships or certain types of people.
Why you've been stuck in the same cycles.
Why there are things that are attractive to you in romantic relationships and why other things are repulsive.
It helps you understand you and why you are the way you are. Here's the thing, like your parents dictate and define and they create your standard and your view of femininity, of masculinity, and of God and humanity. The way that they loved you or treated you or abused you or neglected you defines all of that. It's actually the lens that you view the world from, whether you hate it or love it.
And that's why if you actually go into a counseling session, a lot of times if you're talking about, relationships with the opposite sex, like let's say you go into a counseling session as a lady and you're talking about all of these painful things that are happening with men over and over and over again, a really healthy question a counselor might ask is, what was your relationship like with your father? Tell me about that relationship. Tell me about the way that you saw him, the way that you guys interacted. Just tell me a little bit about that, because that'll give a huge framework for the reasons why you interact with masculinity in a certain way. Yeah. I know a lot of Christians make God out to be this angry, disconnected God, or this God that has conditions on love, or this God that is actually abusive, judgmental in a condemning way, accusational. Withholds love, is honoring you when you have good performance. A lot of that is actually shaped by what we experience with our parents in abuse, in neglect, and in things that we don't even usually have language for because we're too young to actually create logical conclusions about what we'd experience.
Here's the thing, here's what I created this title, Your Parents Are the Problem, because I first wanted to trigger you, and I second wanted to open up this dialogue where you could understand and start grabbing a hold of, oh, this is why I am the way that I am. Once you can recognize why you function the way you do and where it came from, it's actually really, really liberating. But what I also want for you is to hear your parents are not really the problem. They're in the sense that they aren't the villain in the story. They have their own pain, their own belief systems, their own traumatic childhood. They have all of their stuff that they're bringing to the table. So
in the way that they've parented you.
In the way they've parented you. So what's really hard about this topic is, on one hand, you have to go through a process and maybe a season or a couple of years of seasons where you're actually looking at and recognizing how they negatively affected you in order for you to heal. When I first started my healing journey, would justify for my parents. I felt there's an innate thing in children where we want to protect our parents. You might not have that, maybe you do, but there's this thing where you recognize, oh, I want to honor my parents. They've laid everything down for me. They've loved me, and so I want to see what.
You keep hitting this leaf and it keeps moving all over the place behind your ear.
Let's move. We have to get to so I would justify for my parents, and I would try to go on the healing journey and recognizing where I felt neglected or abandoned. And I couldn't even address it because I'd be like, no, my parents didn't mean to do that. No, that was never their intention. But because I was trying to justify for them, it kept me in denial of how I was actually affected, which stopped me from being able to heal. So on one hand, there's a process where we need to get honest with ourselves and look at why and how you were affected and how that's leaking into your life. But on the other hand, you don't want to vilify them. You don't want to demonize them and blame them and make it their fault and make them the bad guy in the story. So our camera dies all the time because we forget to charge it and we forget to ask our assistant to charge it. So if everything looks a little different, that's why. I was talking about not vilifying your parents. So there's a process we go on where we have to recognize how our parents negatively affected us and not defend them, try to protect them, or justify for them. We have to break denial over their poor effect in our lives. But then there's a process we have to go on where we can actually connect with love and compassion and not vilify them or demonize them and make them the enemy and the problem. But those two things and the marriage of those two things, being able to recognize like, oh, my mom really poorly affected me like this, but I can also see that she didn't get the love that she needed when she was a little girl. So she's not the problem. She's not the enemy. I'm not going to blame her for that, but I am going to feel it. I am going to grieve it. I am going to learn how to get those needs met. And at the same time, I'm also going to have compassion for her and release her from punishment. But those two things, that's like several years of process if you do it well. So I'm sharing that, not so I can say do both of these things so that you can do this process well and heal well. What I'm saying is the pendulum swing from this thing to this thing might happen multiple times over the course of several years. And that's okay. It's good. It's healthy, but you're not going to be able to do it perfectly. And you're not going to be able to keep both of those things married during the entire process. And that would be a lot of pressure on you if you tried to do that. So those are just a few of my pointers.
So there are several different ways that we normally feel towards our parents when we're in our adult lives. Like we might think that our parents are heroes. And so they've never done anything wrong. They've been great. I have tremendous parents. I love them. You know, we were working with a client the other day, and she was talking about how she's like, we were asking her questions because she was bringing up a lot of pain in her marriage and just different judgments she has that she's working through. She's really awesome. But we were like, okay, well, tell us about your parents. She's like, oh, it's not because of my parents. My parents were amazing. And
they were perfect.
She's like, they were perfect.
They didn't even fight.
I don't remember them ever having a fight. And then as she's saying this, I was like, I am so sorry because you never got to see their humanity or them work through pain. Yeah. You never actually got to get the skills and tools that you were meant to learn as a child because they invited you into their messes. They showed you how they clean up their messes. They never brought you into that. And that's really sad because they actually sheltered you from a necessary thing that you're supposed to experience in development is how do we work through conflict when stakes are high? Well, how do we work through pain? How do we work through insecurities?
So what she saw was, I have perfect parents. They love God. They're so kind. They never fight. They don't have any problems. If they do have problems, they go into another room and close the door. And to her, this makes her parents perfect. But now that she is married and has pain coming up and is working through all of this stuff, what we were able to help her recognize is actually your parents did you a massive disservice by never inviting you into how to resolve conflict, how to be met with love in the middle of mess, how to have confrontation and end in love and connection. So you had all of the experience of perfect marriage and perfect relationship with none of the reality of what actually comes with that. And so that was actually robbed from you in your childhood, and now you don't have any of the tools you need to do marriage or process well or to love your husband well or to love yourself well while you're hurting and working through pain.
And so there was a deep loneliness that she had to process through and a sadness and a grieving of, oh my gosh, this is something my parents never gave me. And it's something now I have to learn and develop with God, and I have to develop this and learn how to engage in something that feels completely new. But a part of that process looks like feeling compassion and love from God because we do feel that loneliness, and it's not a fix that we need immediately. It's actually just recognizing, not minimizing that pain of childhood of I missed out on something, recognizing it, feeling it, maybe even feeling anger come up, like not shutting it down or shaming yourself for feeling things, healthily grieving so that you can come to the place where you're like, now that I feel, and I feel full permission to feel all these things, I can look at mom and dad and go, in their humanity, they didn't know how to give this to me. Yeah. But I may need to feel pain towards them for a moment so that I can not minimize what's going on so that compassion can feel accessible to me.
And hear us too, like, first, what an awesome experience for your entire childhood to feel like it was perfect and there weren't problems. Right? Like I you cannot compare pain, first off. So you have the abusive family, and then you have the family where everything's perfect, but there's all this stuff happening behind closed doors that you don't know about. You actually can't compare the pain of those two experiences. So I look at that and I'm like her experience, and I'm like, man, like what a gift that she didn't go through trauma, or she wasn't abused, or da-da-da-da-da. What I don't want you to hear us saying is like her parents royally screwed up, how dysfunctional, blah, 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 blah. We're not shaming or vilifying her parents. We're saying, actually, they did the best that they knew how to do. They did a really, really good job, but here's still an expression of marriage and relationship that she entirely missed out on, because as she would say it, life was always rainbows, flowers, and butterflies my whole life. And now I feel like, oh, well, now I'm in the real world, and it's not like that, and I feel totally deceived.
And for me, I remember when I was a single guy before Sammy, and I was realizing like I actually avoided commitment most of my life. Like every time a relationship hit 4 months, 5 months, I would look for everything wrong in the woman and sabotage the relationship until she broke up with me. Mm-hmm. I wasn't able to voice what I wanted. I felt like I was scared that I would destroy a woman by being honest with her. And I believed that I had all this power to hurt and affect women, and so I didn't show up fully. Yeah. And I didn't even know that this was what I believed about my mom. I didn't know that I believed that she was fragile. I didn't know that I believed that she was powerless to take care of herself. But these are all belief systems I had to address and confront in order to get healing, so I could step into showing up with my strength and power in a healthy way in a marriage. And first in relationships and dating, and then in marriage.
So I want to use this process for you as the example, and we can keep it focused on that.
Totally.
But what we want you to get out of this video is first that there needs to be a process that you go on to actually look at the pain and how you were affected in your childhood with your dynamics with your mom and with your dad and the role that you played. The next thing, I just read it and then I forgot it, is finding a way to have a voice in the areas where you felt the most powerless. And I'm actually just going to go through the list really quick so that we can keep ourselves on track. And then after that, it's looking at like, how do I give myself a voice with myself in these areas, but how do I also give myself a voice with my parents? If you're able to, if your parents are alive and you have a relationship with them, how do I give myself a voice with them? And what does it look like to give myself a voice and still honor them? So we're going to briefly hit on these things. Again, there's going to be so much that we cannot cover, sadly, because this is a YouTube video. And if you need more help, this is what our courses are for. So in recognizing your childhood pain and the role that you played with mom and how it affected the cycles of relationships with women later on, what did that look like for you? And you can share your example and then teach on it to give yourself a voice in that and to confront her.
Well, I would be in the camp of one of those people that thought my parents were perfect, amazing, the best parents. Like, if you ask any of my friends, amazing. And they're amazing, and I love them. Like, but it was that they were faultless, and I couldn't actually admit the places where my mom hurt me because of her pain and her past trauma, and there was this little boy in me that was unwilling to feel the pain of what I didn't get in my childhood. And it's not to victimize myself, it's not to live in a constant state of victimhood, which is actually what I was scared of. And I'd never wanted to be a victim, and because I had so much judgment towards people victimizing themselves, I minimized my pain. I didn't allow myself to go on a journey of feeling what I didn't get, that I was meant to get as a child. Yeah. A space to be completely and perfectly loved. Like, ultimately, what I do want to teach on just for a moment is that our parents represent God to us. As a child, we are 100% dependent on them. 100% dependent on them pretty much until we're like 7 years old. And those developmental years shape our identity more than any other years of our lives. And then we carry all these belief systems about ourselves, about love and everything into our developmental stages after that, and then pretty much when we're adults, we think that everything is in real time, and we don't think that our past has any effect or influence on how we do life now.
Psych.
And we think, oh, if I can just find the perfect guy, or if I can just find the perfect spouse, or if I just find the right friends, or if I just find the right job,
if I can be perfect.
Yeah, and we do all these external things that we think will just make life good, and we judge what's good or bad based on how much peace we have, and what we feel successful in, when it's like, no, there's an entire paradigm that we live by because
and
of
it's subconscious.
How we grew up.
Like everything that we're unpacking, we subconsciously lived in for years and didn't know it until we went on this journey identifying it. And I'll also just say, if you're hearing this and you can't identify with any of it, it's probably because your heart hasn't felt safe enough to actually go there yet. It's probably because you haven't had the leadership that's invited you into this process. Because we have hundreds of clients who came to us because they just wanted to be a little more connected to God or a little more ready for marriage. And they were like, I never realized until I did your program how much was going on in me and how much pain I had and how many childhood needs I had that didn't get met. I actually just had a client yesterday who was like, I just thought I had like low level anxiety and was kind of insecure and that everything else was fine. And she's like, now I'm recognizing all of the things that have been at play this whole time, which is so liberating because I feel like I finally have the tools to navigate through it and I finally know what's going on in me.
It took me 9 months of confronting my mom to actually feel like I could have a voice, to feel like a man, to feel like I was free to have power and strength, mm-hmm. that I felt like I could break the lie that women were fragile, and I didn't realize, but after I got to processing, like, because of some of the things that happened in my childhood, the truths that I believed in my heart were that the only way to satisfy my mom was by shutting down my heart and my voice. I watched my dad model love by shutting down his heart and voice in marriage of what he needed. I thought that that's what a healthy sacrifice looked like in marriage, is shut down everything that could hurt somebody and